So in this lesson, we're going to, again, work with proofs and specifically work with how we can use right angles and proving that triangles are similar. So if you recall, perpendicular lines form right angles, which are always congruent. So this is the line of reasoning that you have to think of when you see this symbol in a proof. These are perpendicular lines. My pen will work. Oh, so I had an eraser, duh. Perpendicular lines will form right angles, which will be congruent. So when you see perpendicular lines, you'll be able to say that you have a pair of congruent angles because they will be right angles. So if we look here, if I want to prove triangle ABD is similar to triangle EBC, right? So your options are angle, angle, side angle, side, and side, side, side. Well, I have information about AD is perpendicular to DB because these two lines are perpendicular. And then they also tell me that EC is perpendicular to DB. So you also know that there is a right angle here. So I already have one pair of angles. And since there's nothing else given to me about the sides, I know I have to look for a congruent angle. Now, if you were going to draw these separately, you're going to split up the triangles. We're just going to assume that this connects very nicely. If I was going to rewrite ECB out here, I would be able to see that angle B is in both of my triangles and is therefore congruent to itself. So all I need to do is state that I have a pair of right angles which are congruent and that angle B is congruent to itself, and I can use AA to prove that the triangles are similar. So first, we write our given statements like we're used to. So when it comes to congruent right angles, there's a couple ways that you could write out this statement. If you want to go right in to state that angle 1 is congruent to angle 2, your reason needs to include a couple of things, right? So what you need to say is that perpendicular lines form right angles which are always congruent. Now, the reason why you have to say all of those things is because that is establishing that you have right angles because of perpendicular lines, and because they are right angles, they are congruent. You can also split it apart and say angle 1 and angle 2 are right angles for your first statement, and then say they're congruent, and you'd be able to split that statement apart. But if you want to say it all in one line, you can. You just need to make sure that you have all three things. So perpendicular, right, and congruent in order to have the correct reasoning. Now I just have to say that angle B is congruent to angle B, and we use the reflexive postulate. And now I can say my proof statement, triangle ABD is similar to triangle EBC. And my reason here is AA similar to AA. So for this one, I'm given two pairs of perpendicular lines. So I'm going to have two right angles. And I'm giving another pair of congruent angles. Now, it's asking if triangle UXW, so I'm going to highlight UXW, is this similar to WYV? Probably should have chose more different colors, but oh well. So if we look, UX So UX is perpendicular to VW. So because they're perpendicular, I have a pair of right angles. So UX is perpendicular to VW. Now, if you look at the right angles that I drew, only one of them is really the angle of a triangle. So I'm actually going to erase this guy because it's not going to help me. And then I also have that WY. So WY is perpendicular to UV. So again, I'm going to draw my right angles where it is inside the triangle. So now I can see that I'm going to have a pair of congruent right angles because of perpendicular lines. So I have to look and see what other information I am given. I am given that angle V is congruent to UWX. So UWX is this entire thing. So because of that, I know that these two triangles are going to be similar by angle, angle, because I have two congruent pairs of angles. So let's write this out. First, start with your given statements. UX perpendicular to VW, YW perpendicular to UV, and angle V is congruent to angle UWX. Reason it is given. Now I have my right angles labeled as angles 1 and 2, so I can say that angle 1 is congruent to angle 2. And again, you'd have to, if you go straight to this step, you have to write out your entire statement. If I wanted to write this one with my two statements, let's say that I'm going to write this in 2, you would first state that angle 1 and angle 2 are right angles. Reason perpendicular lines form right angles. And because I now have two right angles, I can say that right angles are congruent. And now that is my second pair of angles because the first one was given to me. So I can state that triangle UXW is similar to triangle WYV. Reason angle angle is similar to angle angle. So again, we're going to look at our triangles. So I have AED as the top and ACB as the bottom. I'm given a pair of perpendicular lines. DE is perpendicular to AB, so I have a right angle here. And AC is perpendicular to BC, so I have a right angle here. Now, if I look at my diagrams, I can also see that A is a shared angle, so it is going to be in both triangles. So again, I'm going to use angle, angle. So write out our givens. So as long as you label your angles, you can call them angle 1 and angle 2. Reason perpendicular lines form right angles which are congruent. So that was my first pair of angles. My second pair of angles is just that angle A is congruent to angle A, reflexive. And now I can state that the triangles are similar. Reason, angle, angle, similar to angle, angle. So here again, we're going to be writing a proof. I'm going to set up my two columns. Statement and reason. I want to prove that the triangles are similar, so I can do that using either AA, side angle side, or side side side. Let's look at the given information. So we have two pairs of perpendicular lines. So I'm first going to find those. So AB is perpendicular to BE, so I have a right angle there, as well as DE and BE, so I have a pair of right angles. And they also give me that angle ACF, so ACF, so this guy, and angle DFC, so this guy, are congruent. Prove that triangle ABC and DEF are similar. So if I look at my highlighted triangles, so here's one, and here's the other. And if I was going to look, I have one pair of congruent angles as well as the one that was given to me. So in total I have two, so I have enough to prove using AA. So let me write out my given statements. So I know that angle 1 is congruent to angle 2. Reason, perpendicular lines form right angles which are congruent. So that gives me the other pair of angles that I need. So I can say that triangle ABC is similar to triangle DEF using AA. There you go. Okay, so now looking at your homework, this should look very similar. So we're given DE is perpendicular to EB, AB is perpendicular to BE, and angle A is congruent to angle D. So let's label. So I know that DE is perpendicular to EB. So I have a right angle. I also know that AB is perpendicular to BE. So I have another right angle. So I have a pair of congruent angles. I'm also given that A is congruent to D. So very similar to the last one, we're going to use angle angle. So we write out with what we're given. So I can say that angle 1 is congruent to angle 2 because perpendicular lines form right angles that are always congruent. And now because they gave us angle A and angle D, I have two pairs of angles, so I can simply say that triangle CAB is similar to triangle FDE using angle angle. So here we can see that we're trying to prove that angle CBD and triangle EFD are similar. So we're given a bunch of information in the chart. So BD is perpendicular to AC. So I have a right angle here. DF is perpendicular to AE. So I have a right angle here, so I have a pair of right angles. So if we look at the chart, we're first going to say that angle 1 and angle 2 are right angles. And then angle 1 is congruent to angle 2, because right angles are congruent. Now if you look at the next line, angle is opposite of congruent, sides are congruent. So that's going back to our idea of an isosceles triangle. When you have two congruent sides, you have two congruent bases. So we know that AC and AE are congruent. So then our base angles, let's call them 3 and 4, are also going to be congruent, because if this is an isosceles triangle, then your base angles are congruent. They didn't state it is an isosceles triangle, so you're not going to use that in your reasoning. You can just say that angle 3 is congruent to angle 4 because they are opposite of congruent sides. And like we've been doing, this is similar by angle, angle.